We are, of course, following the breaking news out of Utah right now. And I just want to sort of clarify where we are right now. There was back and forth about whether a suspect, a person of interest, or a subject had been apprehended. There was an individual in custody. Just moments ago, we got information from FBI Director Kash Patel that that person has been released after an interrogation by law enforcement, which would lead one to conclude that the suspect, whoever pulled this off, whoever committed this heinous act, is at large presently at the moment. We are, of course, going to continue following this situation. I want to bring in Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of the state of Connecticut. He has, of course, experienced horrific gun violence in his own state and is author of the book, The Violence Inside Us, A Brief History of an Ongoing American Tragedy. Senator, I wish that we did not have such regular occasions to speak in the aftermath of something, a wrenching and horrible act of violence, but we are here again. Your thoughts about what we have seen happen today?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think about is Charlie Kirk's family, having spent way too much time with the sons and daughters and mothers and fathers of those who have fallen from gun violence. There's just no words to describe what they're going through right now. Nobody should have to live through this horror. But I'm certainly thinking about the quickening pace of political violence in this country. In an extraordinarily short amount of time, you've seen the murder of state legislators in Minnesota, attempted assassinations of the president of the United States. Obviously, January 6th still lives in our very present memory. And we've got to have a conversation about how we draw a line here, and we can't afford to argue who's more at risk, the right or the left. The fact of the matter is the shots are being fired at political figures, whether they are Republicans or Democrats. There has been a permissiveness about political violence, and I do think the President of the United States has to answer for the way in which he's created that culture of permissiveness. But there have been elements of the left who have lionized and celebrated violence as well. And this is a moment for everybody to assess where we are and recognize that our entire democratic experiment is going to crumble if people don't believe that they're safe when they express their political views.
Yeah, that's very foundational. I just want to note here, and we've been noting it tonight, that we don't yet know who did this. We don't know their motives. And it very well may be, as was the case, I think, in the wake of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, that those motives or politics were illegible, inscrutable, something of a black box. And that's part of the context here. Although the point that you make there, I think, part of the reason we've seen such universal and unanimous condemnation, immediate, heartfelt, unanimous, is precisely because I think everyone understands that we feel like we're on the precipice of something that is not the sort of democratic society that we all believe in and want to have.
Yeah, that's right. And we do not yet know the motive here. I did hear the governor of Utah, somebody that I generally trust, call this a political assassination. Maybe he has information that the rest of us don't. But yes, and I think this requires a really deep dive into how we've arrived at this moment. It is about the celebration of violence that happens, the rationalization of violence, but it's also about a country where political identity has become really ahistorically central to the way in which we wake up every day and find meaning and purpose. And that's because a lot of other healthier identities, family identity, work identity, local identity, have become less accessible. So we look today at the left or the right as the enemy. And it's worth us stepping back and understanding how we reclaim a sense of ourself that maybe is not so rooted in politics, which is inherently oppositional. And sometimes that oppositional force sort of becomes so overwhelming that it treads into violence.
There's also the security concerns, which I think haunt so much of public life now. I mean, there's that period after 9/11. I was thinking about this recently. I was, visiting a family member in a hospital and waiting online to go through a metal detector and remembering that I lived in a time when you could walk into a hospital, you could walk into an office building, right? All that went away after 9/11. We've now are used to essentially airport security in any building we enter. You know, I and every political figure and public figure and author and professor and across the political spectrum of ideology has sat underneath the tent with a microphone to talk to a bunch of people. That's like an essential part of what a free and open society is, and we can't let that go away.
Correct. I want to bring back into the conversation my friend and colleague, senior MSNBC White House correspondent Von Hilliard. Because I know you, I know that while you were quickly making your way to a camera, you were also doing reporting. Just tell us what you're learning.
I know that at this point, Nicole, I think the Washington, D.C. has effectively come to a halt. This is a moment where Charlie Kirk is somebody who had ingratiated himself across not just this White House and this administration, but up on Capitol Hill and in state races around the country. For anybody that is in and around MAGA politics, which is effectively today's Republican Party, you will have come across Charlie Kirk. This is somebody who, for the last decade and plus, he started his organization, Turning Point USA, back in 2012. It really kind of became a bigger organization back in 2016 when it latched on to the then insurgent Trump campaign, and it ultimately led to what it is today. This is a 31-year-old who is now deceased and been killed. Charlie Kirk is somebody who had struck up close relationships and friendships with people that in the White House. And of course, the President of the United States, J.D. Vance, was somebody who was also a close friend. Charlie Kirk was there traveling with him day to day in the final days of his primary campaign back in May of 2022. He had struck up a close friendship with Don Jr. He had struck up a close friendship with other key officials inside of this White House. And so in many ways, while he didn't work directly in the government, he was somebody who had pushed the Republican Party into making a MAGA future beyond even Donald Trump. Somebody who back in 2023, early 2023, I was in California at an RNC meeting, and he was the one that was trying to rally for the ouster of Ronna McDaniel as RNC chair. Somebody who effectively was trying to push this next generation to ensure that the party stuck to its MAGA accords. And again, I come back to the friendship part of this here, because when we're talking about our politics, Nicole, and in conversations that I've had over the years about Charlie Kirk, he is somebody who is eager to engage with people and debate them, and that is what he was doing on that university campus here today, welcoming people to a microphone to go toe-to-toe with him. And I think that this is not a conversation about the actual words, but it's about the mere presence of the words and the ability of Charlie Kirk to have a podcast, to have a place on television airwaves, and to go and onto college campuses and engage in that way. That is what we are talking about here today, and that was taken from this from the country. And I don't know what these days ahead look like. I was on a plane with Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They went on a quick day trip to Chicago for an event, and both of these individuals had struck up relationships with him in previous years. The Attorney General considered him a close friend, and so in many ways, this is a human story of loss of somebody that people in our politics considered to be a close friend. And also, I think when we're talking about the politics of what Charlie Kirk represented, he was somebody in the Republican Party that tried to lift up youth conservative voices and tried to position that as the future. And so this is one where I think that in the days ahead, we will see a very quiet White House, and especially up even on Capitol Hill, Republican lawmakers came to know Charlie Kirk. And so in a lot of ways, you know, I think we've compared Steve Bannon to a Rush Limbaugh figure because Charlie Kirk was more of an activist type. I don't know if that's the right comparison, but Charlie Kirk, if anybody was running or worked in Republican politics over the last several years, they will have worked with or had befriended Charlie Kirk along the way.
Let me ask you, Vaughn, about the statements that I think came in while you were making your way to a camera for us. Former President Joe Biden and former Vice President and Democratic nominee Kamala Harris both strongly condemning this act of political violence that took the life of Charlie Kirk. He obviously advocated for some of the most sort of extreme policies and characteristics, both substantively and temperamentally, inside the MAGA movement. But it seems significant and important that the last two standard bearers for the Democratic Party are among the first people, along with California Governor Gavin Newsom, to condemn this act as vile and disgusting. And I don't want to play a game of looking back for the timestamp on when the condemnations came in for the attack against Paul Pelosi. I believe they were not quite as clear and not quite as quick. But
many FBI agents who have been devoted to domestic terrorism in particular, domestic terrorism squads and those working on domestic terrorism cases, have been diverted to the immigration enforcement effort, which is the thing that the FBI normally does not do. They've been required to go out on patrol, some full time. Some have just walked away from their domestic terrorism duties. And this is at a time when, you know, as we all know, extremism, domestic extremism in this country is on the rise and political violence is on the rise. The FBI is the agency that we expect to address that. And it's not clear that all the resources that are capable of being brought to bear on this problem are in fact being brought to bear.
Kendall. What you see here is the failure of Donald Trump's administration to actually do their job. We don't know the motivations of the man that took Kirk's life. We don't know yet. Some people have said, well, it's gonna be a progressive, but there are many elements on the right that don't, much like with Trump, there are elements on the right that don't like him. And as we know, when it came to Trump, the people that tried to take him, both of them were Republicans. Not necessarily MAGA, but they were Republicans. So we don't know yet. And one of the reasons we don't know is that the failure under Kash Patel has been astounding, staggering. They've already announced that they got the guy twice. And both times they had to backtrack that. They had to lean back on that because it wasn't them. And now they still don't know who it is. I mean, what I would assume is, given how far the shot was and whatnot, it's probably somebody with some knowledge and training. But more than that, this is rooted in the failure of Trump. As noted in one of those clips I played for you, some of Trump's moves to divert all staff seemingly, or many staff, from counterterrorism and put everything into his obsession with getting grandmas out of the country has left other elements of law enforcement unable to respond to such things. In addition, Trump has fired or forced to resign a lot of career FBI professionals. We've been seeing it. Just yesterday, there was like a lawsuit announced where top FBI officials are suing the Trump administration and basically saying we were fired for political purposes, and the FBI was basically given a quota to fire us, or, you know, Patel would have been fired himself if he didn't do it. And then in addition, they made specific firings of FBI officials in places like Salt Lake City, you know, in Utah and in other places that may have left them less prepared to address either crimes before they happen or to apprehend people after the crimes have been committed. So don't get it twisted. One, we do not know the motivation of the shooter, but I think it's fair to say that Trump's decisions have played a part in why these things keep happening.